I want to welcome Scott. Thank you for your time. I've been a really big fan of you. I'm just going to go through a short list of your long list of accolades, just so people know who you are. You're a partner program manager at Microsoft. This is a very senior position. You have over 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. You're a published author. You've given multiple talks, very prestigious events. You're a tech guru. All of these accomplishments, I just want to ask you, how did you get started? What inspired you to do what you do? What was your journey like?
Thank you very much for that very generous introduction. Um, when when I was coming up, it was like the late '80s, mid '80s, and we didn't have computer labs. You had like a computer in the building, and my fifth grade teacher, when I was 11, brought in an Apple II computer. And I immediately started messing with it. And I knew that was something cool that I would want to mess with. And I was causing trouble and just generally being a ruffian. But then that kept me from like messing around on the weekends. And she made a deal with the superintendent of schools and later the principal of the school to loan just me that computer on the weekends, which was totally showing favoritism on her part. So Mrs. Hill let my dad specifically back our pickup truck up against the back of the school, steal the computer on Friday afternoons, and as long as we had it back by Sunday afternoon. For me, that was the intersection of the creation of luck, where being prepared and an opportunity present themselves. Because there were probably other kids that were prepared that could have used that opportunity, but she gave me that opportunity. Therefore, I was lucky to have that opportunity. If I had not had a computer at home, that would have never had happened. So she let me borrow that for several months. And then one day I came home. One day I came home and my dad's 1972 blue Ford Econoline van was gone. It was no longer parked in the front of our house. And I came in and I said, "Where's the van?" And he said, "We sold it and we went to Sears and we bought a computer." So that was another opportunity where they sacrificed something and we didn't have a van anymore. And now I had a computer. So that is where it all started. And that's why I think it's so important for people to have access.
It's interesting you mentioned the intersection between luck and preparation, I believe. Um, I myself am pretty early in career, and I remember when I was in high school, had lots of questions about how am I going to figure out what I want to do with my life? What am I passionate about? I think a lot of young people have these questions. What advice would you give to those young people, especially those who want to go into tech, like who are trying to pursue their dreams? What advice would you give them to sort of help meet that intersection?
Yeah. I have two young sons that are 15 and 17. And because of that, and because of my age, which seems to come up more and more that I get older and older, I recognize that my advice is always given and taken through a generational lens. So I'm starting to get me paranoid about giving advice to someone like yourself, 30 years my junior, because it's a different time. Additionally, we didn't know about neurotypical versus not neurotypical and all the different things, right? So all of these lenses can cause one to have a bit of analysis paralysis. That said, I'm a big believer in a big part of life is showing up. I don't think that you can muscle a computer science degree, a software engineering career alone in your bedroom. I think there is a person that can do that. There are people who can do that. There are people who have done that. But for the average Joes and Janes, find humans. Humans are supposed to hang out with humans. So for me, it was user groups, it was nerd dinners, it was hanging out at the mall. If you have a bunch of folks that you play D&D with, or you go to the mall and have Magic the Gathering, or you go to the club with your friends, where are your other friends that are your computer people? If you're alone in your computer journey, that can be really challenging. So whether they're virtual friends or physical friends, show up first and remember why you're doing it. And that's because humans.
Do you have any sort of like common misconceptions in your mind that people have about what it takes to be successful or even be a programmer? I think the sort of nerdy archetype might scare some people. What do you have to say about that?
Oh, yeah. I think it's wonderful that we're in a very inclusive space right now where someone can be can have a YouTube that has like their makeup haul, and the next one can be like learning Python. Like that is and should be completely a thing. In fact, on my desk right here, I have all these things that inspire me because I want to make my space inspirational for myself. I have Fabulous Batman. For folks that are listening to the podcast, I'm holding up a Lego man who is pink. He is Batman. He has a ballerina outfit on and a fairy wings, and he's a ninja because he's got dual katanas. That's who you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be a whole person with diverse interests because he's a ninja, he's Batman, he's ballerina, he's freaking Batman, right? So next to that, I have the Swiss Army knife that my father gave me when I was 12. And the Swiss Army knife is funny because it's really mediocre at a million things, right? It's a lousy pair of scissors and it's kind of a mediocre saw, but it is diverse in its interests. And I try to do that. So I would encourage people to be what are called T-shaped developers. Have a broad series of opportunities and things that you're interested in, and then go deep on one area.
One of the things that I personally been getting interested to lately as a young person is sort of like life philosophy type things. Someone who I watch a lot is Ryan Holiday. I want to ask you, what standards do you hold yourself to when it comes to being successful for pursuing opportunities? What sort of like rules do you try to live by to get to the level of success where you're at now?
I think that I read this quote a couple of days ago in this book. It was something like, politeness often comes from fear and deference, but kindness is always the correct thing to do. So like, it costs nothing to be kind. And especially if you're coming from a place of privilege, whether it be positional privilege or age privilege or monetary privilege, like there's no value in me hollering at the guy that's bagging my groceries. Like in no scenario is there anything that he can do that would cause me to yell at that person because they're having a bum day. Someone might say that that's a weak perspective, or, well, they should be doing their job. Like just, these are all humans. So I'm constantly reminding myself multiple times a day, why are we doing this? Whether we are firefighters or zookeepers or the guy that bags groceries, or whether we're software engineers at Microsoft, if we're not helping humans do better, then what is all this crap for? That has caused me to become very anti-consumerism rather. You probably, whatever it is you want to buy, you probably don't need it. And also that electrons are cheaper than molecules. So I tend to collect experiences instead of shipping crap around in boxes from China.
No, that's very poignant. And it goes into my next point. You sort of mentioned, what are we doing this for if we're not doing it to help people? That begs the question, are there any like maybe mistakes you've seen other people make just throughout your career that you think if you had a chance to tell other people about this mistake that you would, what would that be?
People are worried about you and thinking about you way less than you think. You could say something, let's say you and I were in a meeting together and you like, I'm just totally brainstorming here. You wanted to know like what a 3-letter acronym was. You're like, I say DNS and you're like, what's DNS? Or I say SOAP and you're like, what does SOAP stand for? And then I tell you. And then for the next 3 weeks, you're beating yourself up because you're like, I didn't know what DNS stood for. And Hanselman was in a meeting. Da, da, da. I have forgotten that. So then why are you letting it weigh you down, right? So those moments, we all have these moments where 15 years ago, you did something in middle school and then you're just walking along on a Tuesday afternoon and then you and you remember it and you start, oh my God, what was I thinking? And then you wince. You wince because the pain of dumb things you said 10, 15 years ago came back just to remind you. You can't have a 30-year career in tech if you are constantly being reminded by every stupid thing that you ever said. No one cares. They probably aren't thinking. And if you really feel uncomfortable about asking the question, ask an ally in a senior person. You just go, hey, what is that? What does DNS stand for? But don't let it like stress you out. Don't let it weigh you down. It just doesn't matter. It really matters so much less than you think it does.
This makes me think, this is an interesting question, so I'll see how you tackle it. But sort of with your personal experience, I don't remember if you can remember like your first day on your first job.
Oh yeah,
so to speak.
totally.
Given like your experience now, is there anything you would do differently? Or maybe you wouldn't. Maybe everything worked out perfectly, or
No,
where
no.
you want to be now.
I would have talked less. I would have listened more, and I would have taken better notes. I feel like for the first 5 or 10 years of my career, I was just letting it happen. And there's a big difference between letting your life happen by default versus being intentional and deliberate about what you're doing. I think that's an emotional maturity thing, though. Like for me, telling my 17-year-old to like pay attention, stay focused. He's not wired. He can't like. There's only so much time. There's only so much attention that he has, right? So the irony of this is now at 50, I'm ready to go to school. Like, let's go. I'm ready. Put me in, coach. If I could go back to high school right now, I would crush it. So I think it's funny that we're just not ready for those things. But if there's something in you in your mid-20s where you can just stop for a second and breathe, even have an appointment with yourself, look at your week and go, am I doing the things that are intentionally going to make me happier, healthier, my family happier, healthier, safer?
Yeah, I think that's good advice. We're often not really told to slow down that much and reflect, especially in this very fast-paced world. So I think that's great advice.
I love seeing young people like New York hipsters with like flip phones. They seem to be very happy.
I haven't seen a flip phone in years.
But see, you don't need Instagram. You can make your iPhone a flip phone real quick. Airplane mode works on the ground. I use the focus modes on my iPhone, and I have it right now in focus mode. The only thing that can happen right now is my wife calls me.
Okay.
I have no notifications on my watch. There is exactly nothing, and this is important, that an internet stranger can do to ruin my day.
Wow.
But if you have notifications and badges and all these numbers on your phone, and every little vibration on your phone reminds you that you don't have, little Bow Wow's private jet, why would I let an internet stranger reach out across the connected web and ruin my day?
Yeah.
Turn off notifications.
Is the thief of joy, as they say.
Absolutely. Turn off notifications. And honestly, you don't need Facebook. You don't need Instagram. If you're trying to keep up with the people you went to high school with, if you wanted to keep up with them, they would have your number.
Speaking of high school, or maybe not speaking of high school, but at least I read a lot of books in high school.
Good.
And one of the things I really like to ask people, because I think there's a transformational aspect to reading and books. Are there any books that you've read in your life that maybe have changed your life? I know that you're also an author and have experience with writing. Are there any books that you'd recommend just anyone to read?
I just finished a book yesterday that was a book called The Humans by Matt Haig, about an alien that comes and takes over someone's body in order to kill a bunch of people and then realizes that maybe it was cool to be human after all. I really enjoyed that. I tend to do a lot of sci-fi because I feel like in sci-fi they ask some of the hard questions about what being a human is about and what like ridiculous meat bags we are. Anything like that is good. Anything by Octavia Butler is usually good. Kindred, I appreciate. Old Man's War is a great book. John Scalzi. I mean, I could go on and on. Go to my Goodreads. I actually have a site on Goodreads. You'll end up seeing a bunch of my wife's books as well up there. But like Goodreads is like the social network for like what your friends are reading.
Gotcha. And speaking of Matt Haig, I love his books as well. I've been reading. I forgot the title, but it's about like a library. I need to.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I forgot the title.
It's something library. I'll look it up.
Yeah,
hang on.
It is really good. I think it can be made into
the Midnight Library.
Midnight Library. Yep, it's amazing. Kind of like therapy masquerading as a fiction novel.
Isn't that funny? I pull a Matt Haig book out of thin air, and you're like, "I love Matt Haig."
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. Last question here: where can people find you?
You can Google with Bing for Hanselman, and you'll find either me or my family out there in the world somewhere. I'm basically S. Hanselman on all social networks.
And actually, one more question. If there's one piece of advice you'd like to leave us with, what would that be?
Just don't forget to breathe. It's just not that deep.